The inventory was the only prayer that mattered. I did the count at the lip of the ratway where the upper world of fish guts and cheap perfume gave way to the honest stink of damp stone and desperation. Torches, 7. They were resin-soaked, heavy in the hand. Not the cheap rushes some fools carried. These were made to burn slow and steady. A man in the dark is a dead man. A man with a sputtering torch is a man who is about to be dead. Healing potions. 2. Small vials of the red stuff brewed by some back-alley alchemist. They tasted like rust and regret, but they would close a wound long enough for you to find a new one. Lockpicks. 5. Delicate steel things bought off a Khajiit caravan. They looked like they would snap if you sneezed too hard. They probably would. Mercer Frey never had to worry about the quality of his picks. He and the rest of us made do. Septums, a pouch of 40 for bribes and unexpected fees. And the boy, I counted him too. Sven Snowstrider, 1. A new recruit, eager and stupid with eyes that had not yet learned to stop looking up. He was a liability. Brynjolf had insisted. "The lad needs to see how the stones feel," he had said, his voice smooth as oiled leather. I think Brynjolf enjoyed watching new things break. It was a hobby of his. "Ready, Roland?" Sven shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His sword scraped against the stone wall. The sound was like a scream in the relative stillness. I flinched. "Stop that," I told him, "and try to breathe through your nose. Your mouth hangs open like a landed fish, makes you look like a mark." He snapped his jaw shut. "Sorry. Do not be sorry, be quiet." I lit the first torch, and the flame caught with a greasy hiss, pushing back the shadows and revealing the slick, moss-covered stairs descending into the black. It smelled like old water and older sins. Every trip down here was a risk. The guards almost never came this deep, but there were other things. Skeevers the size of dogs, desperate skooma fiends who would kill you for the lint in your pocket. And the others, the ones like me doing business in the dark, competition. Our job was simple enough, a delivery. A small, heavy box of Dwemer artifacts for a client named Gorm Gro Largash. The artifacts were likely melted down imperial candlesticks, but Gorm did not care about authenticity. He cared about weight and plausible deniability. We were the middlemen, the risk-takers. The ones who ended up with a shiv in the ribs if Maven Blackbriar decided a deal soured her morning cup of spiced wine. "Stick close," I muttered, more to myself than to the boy. "And do not touch anything." We went down. The wooden planks of the upper levels gave way to carved stone tunnels. The air grew thick and wet. The flame of our torch cast long, dancing shadows that turned familiar shapes into monsters. A pile of rubble became a crouching troll. A length of chain, a waiting serpent. Sven flinched at every drip of water. "It is just a leaky ceiling," I said, my voice flat. I had to keep him from bolting. A runner was a noisy thing, and noise brought trouble. "I heard stories," he whispered, his voice was tight, "about the ragged flagon, about a man who lives down here, a ghost." "There are no ghosts," I lied, and the place was full of them. The ghosts of failed thieves and forgotten debts. There are just men who want your purse. You worry about them. We walked for what felt like an hour, the tunnel twisting and turning. This was the easy part, the known territory. Soon we would have to branch off into the less traveled paths, the cisterns and forgotten storerooms where deals were made. The torch had burned down a quarter of its length. The resin dripped onto my glove hot and thick. We reached the first gate, rusted iron bars blocking a side passage, our route. The lock was old, a simple tumbler mechanism. Should have been easy. I handed the torch to Sven. "Hold this steady and high." He took it, his hand trembling slightly. The light danced wildly, making it hard to see the pins. Steady, I hissed. I slid the first pick into the lock. The tension wrench was a familiar pressure against my fingers. I felt the first pin, pushed it. A soft click. The second, another click. The third pin was stiff. I applied more pressure, too much. A sharp snap echoed in the tunnel. The pick was broken. Damn it. What was that? Sven's voice cracked. Nothing, I shot back, pulling out the pieces. Just a bit of bad steel. Inventory update. Lockpicks 4. I took a breath. This was normal. Things break, plans go wrong. You adapt or you die. I pulled out another pick. This one was better made. A bit more flex in the metal. I worked more carefully this time, ignoring the way Sven's breathing hitched every time a skeever chirped in the distance. The third pin gave. Then the fourth. The lock clicked open. I pushed the gate. It groaned, a low, grinding sound of protest. I took the torch back from Sven. See? No ghosts. He did not look convinced. The fear was coming off him in waves, a scent as strong as the mildew on the walls. It made my own palms sweat. Fear was contagious. The tunnel on the other side was narrower, the floor uneven. It sloped down, leading deeper into the guts of the city. The air changed. It was colder here with a foul, Swedish undertone. Rot. Something had died nearby. Recently. Stay sharp, I said. Keep your hand on your sword. The torch had burned down by a third. 6 2/3 left. Not enough. It was never enough. We moved faster. The meeting spot was a collapsed section of an old sewer junction, a small cavern of broken stone and stagnant pools of water. Gorm liked it because it had multiple escape routes. I hated it for the same reason. As we neared, I heard voices, low and guttural, not Gorm's booming Orsimer tone. I held up a hand, stopping Sven in his tracks. I pressed myself against the wall, inching forward until I could peek around the corner. 3 of them, 2 Nords and a Breton, all wearing mismatched armor and carrying crude iron axes. They were not Gorm's men, they were scavengers, freelancers, waiting for someone. Us. It is an ambush, I whispered, pulling back. Sven's eyes went wide. What do we do? Should we go back, tell Brynjolf? And tell him what? That we got spooked by a few gutter rats? No, we handle it. I looked at him. He was pale. This is the job, lad. The part they do not tell you about in the tavern stories. I can fight. Good. Because you are about to. There was no way to go around them. We could retreat, but that meant failing the delivery. And the guild took a dim view of failure. It was bad for business. My business. I unslung the small weighted box from my back. Here is the plan. I go in first. I will try to talk to them. You stay back in the shadows. If I give the signal, you come in fast. Create a distraction, do you understand? He nodded, swallowing hard. The signal was Shore's bones. A common enough curse that it would not sound out of place. I hoped. I took a deep breath, adjusted my grip on the torch, and stepped out into the open cavern. Lost, fellas? The 3 of them turned as one. The Breton, clearly the leader, stepped forward. He had a nasty scar that pulled one side of his mouth into a permanent sneer. Not lost, waiting. You must be Roland. I might be. It depends who is asking. Someone who is about to be a lot richer, he said, grinning. Gorm sends his regrets. He found a new delivery service, one that offers better terms. So that was it. Gorm had sold us out. Cheaper to pay a few thugs to take the merchandise than to pay our fee. It was a common business practice in the Ratway. I should have expected it. Is that so? I kept my voice even. Well, that is a shame. I suppose we will just take our package and be on our way. The Breton laughed. I do not think so. The box, and your coin purse, and the boys. Then we let you walk away. Another lie. They would kill us. No witnesses. That was the first rule of this kind of work. I stalled for time, letting my eyes adjust to the larger space. The cavern was about 30 feet across. The ceiling was low, eaten with thick roots hanging down like grasping fingers. There were 3 tunnels leading out, our way, and 2 others. "Look," I said, trying to sound reasonable. "There is no need for this. We are all just trying to make a living. You take the box. My purse has 20 septims in it. You can have it. Let us go." The Breton's sneer widened. 20? You think we are fools? We know what you guild types carry." He took a step closer. His 2 friends fanned out, flanking him. "The box, now!" I could feel Sven behind me, coiled like a spring. He was going to do something stupid. I needed to control this. All right, all right." I made a show of lowering the box to the ground. "Take it easy." I glanced behind me into the darkness of the tunnel. Shore's bones, this is a heavy one. It was the signal. I did not wait to see what Sven would do. I kicked the box forward, sending it sliding across the slick stone toward the Breton. As he instinctively looked down, I lunged. Not at him, but at the Nord on his right. I slammed the burning end of the torch into his face. He screamed, a high, thin sound, dropping his axe and clawing at his eyes. The smell of burnt hair and flesh filled the air. That is when Sven charged. He came out of the tunnel with a wild yell, a proper Nord battle cry that was far too loud for this enclosed space. He did not go for the other Nord as a distraction. He went straight for the leader. It was brave. It was idiotic. The Breton sidestepped Sven's clumsy swing and brought the pommel of his own axe down hard on the boy's head. Sven grunted and staggered, his eyes glazing over, one down, one half blind, one busy with the fool. I had to end this fast. I dropped the torch, which sputtered in a puddle, and drew my own short sword. The half-blind Nord was stumbling around, still screaming. I ignored him and went for the second one, who was now moving to help his boss finish Sven. I drove my sword into the back of his knee. He howled and collapsed. I did not give him time to recover. A second thrust under the armpit, deep into his chest. He made a wet, gurgling sound and went still. The Breton had knocked Sven to the ground and was raising his axe for the killing blow. I shouted his name. He turned, his face a mask of fury. He had underestimated us. He would not make that mistake again. He came at me, his axe swinging in a wide, powerful arc. I was not a warrior. I was a thief. I did not fight fair. I ducked under the swing, close to his body, and stabbed upward, aiming for his gut. The tip of my blade scraped against a leather strap and glanced off. He grunted and backhanded me across the face. My head snapped back, and the stone wall hit me hard. Stars exploded behind my eyes. He raised his axe again, his scarred face twisted in a triumphant snarl. "Guild trash." A flicker of movement behind him. Sven. He was on his knees, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, but he had his dagger out. He lunged forward and buried it in the back of the Breton's thigh. The man roared in pain and surprise, his killing blow forgotten. He spun around, shaking Sven off like a dog. That was the opening I needed. I scrambled to my feet, my head swimming, and drove my sword into his side, just below the ribs. I put all my weight behind it. The blade went in deep. He gasped, his eyes wide with shock. The axe fell from his fingers, clattering on the stone. He looked down at the sword hilt sticking out of his tunic, then up at me. He tried to say something, but only blood came out. He crumpled to the floor. Silence. The only sounds were the dripping water and our own ragged breathing. The half-blind Nord had fled, stumbling down one of the other tunnels. The torch I had dropped was nearly out, its flame a pale, sickly yellow. I grabbed it just before it died completely. The light was weak, casting flickering, unreliable shadows. I looked at Sven. He was sitting on the floor, staring at the dead Breton, his face a mixture of terror and awe. "You did good, lad," I said. My voice was hoarse. He looked at me, his eyes unfocused. I killed him. No, you saved my life. Now get up. I offered him a hand. He took it. His was cold and shaking. I checked myself over. A nasty bruise was already forming on my cheek, a few cuts, but nothing deep. I had been lucky. I pulled one of the vials from my belt. Inventory update. Healing potions, 1. I drank half and handed the rest to Sven. He drank it without a word. The potion did its work, the familiar warmth spreading through my limbs, dulling the ache in my head. The box was where I had kicked it. I picked it up. It felt heavier now. We need to go, I said. Gorm is not going to be happy as boys failed. He might send more. Where are we going? To find a new buyer. There was a Dunmer alchemist, Belin Hlalu, who sometimes dealt in unusual components. He had a hidden workshop in the lower tunnels, not far from here. He was greedy, but he was discreet. He was our best option. I looked at the torch, and it was more than half gone. We had used far too much time. Inventory update, torches, 6. But this one was about to go out. We left the bodies where they lay. The Ratway would claim them. Nothing went to waste down here. We took the third tunnel, the one the blinded man had not fled down. It was a tight squeeze, a narrow passage that stank of old sewage. The flame of our torch shrank, guttering in the draft. It cast just enough light to see the path a few feet ahead. My head hurts, Sven mumbled after a few minutes of walking. It is supposed to hurt. You got hit with an axe. I thought I would be better at this. Nobody is good at this when they start, I told him. You survived. That is better than most. I did not know why I was trying to comfort him. Maybe because his mistake had saved my life. Maybe because his wide-eyed fear reminded me of myself years ago when I first came to Riften with nothing but a stolen sweet roll and a bad plan. He was a fool, but he was my fool for now. The torch died. It did not sputter or fade. One moment there was light, the next absolute blackness. It was so complete it felt like a physical weight pressing on my eyes. Roland? Sven's voice was a terrified whisper right next to my ear. I am here. I fumbled in my pack, my fingers closing around the rough shaft of another torch. I pulled out my tinderbox. The scrape of flint on steel sounded deafening in the silence. A spark, another. A third one caught on the tinder. I carefully nurtured the tiny flame, bringing it to the resin-soaked tip of the new torch. It flared to life, chasing the oppressive darkness back to the edges of our vision. In inventory update, torches 5, we had to hurry. Belin's workshop was in a section of the old cistern. It was a maze down there. One wrong turn and we could end up in a chorus nest or a Falmer warren. The stories said the Falmer had been pushed out of the lower levels decades ago, but stories were not always true, especially not down here. We found the entrance to the cistern, a crumbling archway marked with a faded alchemical symbol for nightshade. The air inside was heavy with the scent of strange herbs and chemical fumes. It was a cloying, unhealthy smell. Belin Hlalu was a small, withered Dunmer with eyes that saw everything in terms of profit and loss. He was hunched over a bubbling retort when we entered his cramped, cluttered workshop. Shelves filled with jars of glowing mushrooms, dried insects, and things in murky fluid lined the walls. He did not look up. I am busy, come back tomorrow. We have something you might want, I said, placing the box on his workbench. He finally turned, his red eyes narrowing as he took in our disheveled appearance. He glanced from my bruised face to the drying blood on Sven's tunic. Trouble? Business, I corrected. A deal went sour. We have some high-quality, authentic Dwemer metal. We need to move it fast and quiet. Belin ran a long, thin finger over the box. He did not try to open it. Gorm's shipment. It was not a question. I heard he was looking to cut out the guild. His new associates must have been less effective than he hoped. Something like that. This is a risk for me, Roland, he said, tapping the box. Taking guild property that has gone astray. Maven Blackbriar has a long memory. Maven does not need to know, I said. We are offering you a bargain, 70% of its value, cash. He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. You are in no position to bargain. You are bleeding on my floor. You have burned through half your torches, and you have a green boy with you who looks like he is about to faint. I will give you 30%. 60. 35. And you throw in that healing potion you have left. I hesitated. The potion was our only safety net, but septums were septums, and we needed to get out of the ratway. 50, and you keep the potion. Boleyn studied my face for a long moment. He was weighing the risk, the potential profit against the potential for a visit from Delvin Mallory. 40, he finally said. And I forget I ever saw you. Aye, that is my final offer. I looked at Sven. He just stared blankly. He was no help. Fine, I sighed. 40. Boleyn produced a heavy bag of coins from under his bench. He counted them out slowly, his lips moving silently. The clink of the septums was a beautiful sound. He pushed the bag across the table. I scooped it up without counting. Showing trust was a good way to build a reputation, or a good way to get cheated. Down here it was usually both. Pleasure doing business with you, Balin said, already turning back to his retort. He had the box. We had the coin. The transaction was over. He wanted us gone. We left the workshop and plunged back into the tunnels. The weight of the coin pouch was reassuring, but the weight of our failure was heavier. We had not completed the job for Brynjolf. We had sold the merchandise to a third party for less than half its worth. He was not going to be pleased. What happens now? Sven asked, his voice a little stronger. The relief of being alive was starting to sink in. Now we go back to the flagon and we face the music. We took a different route back, a series of maintenance tunnels that ran behind the main thoroughfares. It was longer but safer. We had to move a heavy portcullis at one point, the rusted chain grinding as we strained against it. The effort left us breathless. The torch burned lower and lower. We were in a long, straight corridor when it happened. A section of the floor gave way under Sven's feet. He cried out as his leg plunged through the rotten planks into the darkness below. I grabbed his arm, pulling him back from the edge. He lay on the floor, panting, and his face ashen in the torchlight. My leg, he gasped. I think it is broken. I knelt and examined it. It was not broken, but it was badly twisted. A deep gash from a splintered board was bleeding freely. He would not be able to walk on it. Damn it all to oblivion. I looked at our torch, a mere stump now, the flame licking at my glove. We had maybe 10 minutes of light left. Not enough time to carry him all the way back. All right, I said, my mind racing. Stay here, do not move, do not make a sound, I am going to get help. Do not leave me, he pleaded, his voice cracking. It is dark. I have to, we are out of light. I pulled out my last healing potion, the one I had refused to give Boleyn. Here, drink this. It will stop the bleeding and dull the pain. He took it gratefully. Inventory update. Healing potions. 0. I looked down the dark corridor. I could see a faint glimmer of light far in the distance. The ragged flagon. It was closer than I thought, but the path between here and there was treacherous and unlit. I will be back, I said. I did not know if it was true. I left the burning torch with him. It was a stupid, sentimental gesture. He needed the comfort more than I needed the light. My survival depended on speed and memory, not a few inches of burning wood. Inventory update. Torches 4, but none on me. I stepped out of the small circle of light and into the oppressive black. I moved by touch, one hand on the damp stone wall, my feet shuffling, testing the ground before I put my weight down. The darkness was alive. It breathed on my neck. Every sound was magnified. The drip of water was a footstep, and the scuttling of a skeeter was a chorus hunter. My own heartbeat was a war drum. I counted my steps. I knew these tunnels. I had walked them 1,000 times. Left turn at the cistern overflow pipe, straight for 200 paces, right at the collapsed section with the Draugr carvings. I moved faster, my confidence growing. The darkness was an old friend. It hid me, it protected me. Then I heard it, a low growl coming from somewhere ahead. It was not a skeever. It was deeper, more guttural. I froze, my hand tightening on the hilt of my sword. I pressed myself flat against the wall, holding my breath. Something large shuffled past me in the dark. I could feel the air move as it passed. It smelled of wet fur and old blood. A troll, maybe. Or one of the vagrants who had gone feral down in the deep tunnels. I did not wait to find out. As soon as it passed, I moved again, faster now. My caution replaced by a surge of adrenaline. The faint light of the flagon grew brighter. I could hear the distant sounds of music and laughter. Home, or the closest thing I had to it. I stumbled out of the tunnel and into the cavern that housed the Thieves' Guild headquarters. The sudden light was blinding. I shielded my eyes, blinking away the spots. Brynjolf was standing by the training dummies, watching Vex practice her archery. He turned as I approached. His face, usually set in a mask of easy confidence, hardened when he saw me. He saw the state of my clothes, the blood, the exhaustion. And he saw that I was alone. "Roland," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Report." I took a breath. The delivery was compromised. Gorm set an ambush. And the merchandise? Lost. And we were forced to dispose of it to ensure our escape. It was a better lie than I sold it for pennies to a shifty alchemist. And the boy? He is injured. Trapped in the West Maintenance Tunnel. His leg is broken. Another lie. A broken leg sounded more heroic than a twisted ankle. Brynjolf studied my face, his blue eyes searching for the truth. He knew I was holding something back. He always knew. But he also knew the rules. You do not leave a guild brother behind. Not if you want the others to trust you. "Delvin," he called out, his voice echoing in the cavern. "Take a couple of boys and go with Roland. Bring the new lad back and be quiet about it." Delvin Mallory grunted and pushed himself up from a table where he had been cleaning his nails with a dagger. He gathered 2 other thieves and they looked at me, waiting. I had to go back into the dark. I was tired. My head ached. My luck felt thin, stretched to the breaking point, but I had no choice. I grabbed 2 new torches from the supply chest by the entrance. They felt solid and reassuring in my hand. Inventory update. Torches 6. It felt like a fortune. We plunged back into the tunnels. With Delvin and the others, the darkness felt less threatening. Their casual competence was a comfort. We moved quickly and quietly, our combined torchlight turning the oppressive black into a manageable gloom. We found Sven where I'd left him. The torch had burned down to a tiny nub, its light feeble. He looked up as we approached, his face a mask of pure relief. "I knew you would come back," he said, his voice weak. "We do not leave our own," Delvin said, his tone gruff. He and the other thief made a makeshift stretcher for Sven out of their cloaks. As they lifted him, I retrieved the last sputtering inch of the torch. I held it for a moment, the tiny flame dancing in my palm. It had been his hope, his anchor in the dark. I had left it for him. I am not sure why I am telling you this part. It was not a calculated move, it was just something I did, an instinct. Maybe I was not as hard as I thought I was, or maybe I was just getting soft. In this line of work, they were the same thing. and both would get you killed. We made it back to the flagon without further incident. The journey felt different this time. I was not a lone man running out of resources. I was part of a team, a guild. There was a kind of strength in that, a fragile, a conditional strength that depended on your usefulness and your last successful job. Sven was taken to the infirmary. Brynjolf was waiting for me by the central fire. "The coin from the sale," he said, holding out his hand. It was not a request. I hesitated. The lie was about to unravel. There was no sale. The merchandise was lost in the fight. He just stared at me. The silence stretched. I could feel the eyes of the other thieves on us. This was a test. "Rolfen," Brynjolf said to one of the men who had helped carry Sven, "go and search him." My stomach turned to ice. It was over. I had failed. I had lied. The punishment for that was severe. At best, I would be kicked out, my name added to the blacklist. At worst, they would dump my body in the cistern. Rolfen stepped forward. I did not resist. He went through my pockets, my pack. He found the coin pouch from Berlin. He handed it to Brynjolf. Brynjolf opened the pouch and looked inside. He did not count it. He did not have to. He could tell by the weight it was not the full amount, not even close. He looked up from the bag and his eyes met mine. I braced myself for the verdict. "You salvaged this from the wreckage," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "After fighting off Gorm's ambushers and saving a new recruit. You lost the main prize, but you did not come back empty-handed. That shows initiative." He tossed the pouch to me. "You're cut. The rest goes to the guild, for the lost merchandise." I caught it, stunned. He was giving me an out. He was rewriting the story, turning my failure and my lie into a partial success. "Why?" "Gorm broke the rules," Brynjolf continued, his voice turning hard. "He contracted with the guild, then tried to cut us out. That is an insult. To me. To all of us. He needs to be taught a lesson." He looked around the room. "Vex. Carlia. A word." He was already planning the retaliation. My botched delivery was now the justification for a war. I was not being punished because my failure had given him something he wanted. A legitimate reason to crush a competitor. I was a pawn. My survival was a matter of convenience. It was not mercy. It was business. I stood there, the small pouch of septums feeling worthless in my hand. I had walked through the dark, counted my resources down to nothing, fought for my life and the life of a fool. I had made hard choices and lied to my superiors, and in the end it did not matter. And the guild's machinations were a current far stronger than my small struggles. I was just a piece on the board. I walked over to the bar and sat down. The innkeeper slid a mug of ale toward me without me having to ask. It tasted thin and bitter. I watched Brynjolf talking with Vex and Carlia, their heads bent together, moving pieces in a game I could barely comprehend. My inventory. Torches 5 in the supply chest, healing potions none, lockpicks 4, septums a handful, my cut, my life 1, for now. I finished the ale. I would need to restock. The night was still young. And there was always another delivery to be made, another descent into the dark. The final count was always the same. You started with a handful of tools, a bit of hope. You spent them all just to get back to where you started, and with nothing but the memory of the darkness and the knowledge that you would have to go back in tomorrow. The only thing that changed was the number of ghosts you saw waiting for you in the shadows. I closed my eyes. The inventory was the only prayer that mattered. Torches, potions, picks, and one more day. Just one more day. I opened them again. The firelight of the flagon was bright, but it did not feel warm. It felt like the last torch, the one you leave behind in the dark, burning down to nothing. I touched the bruise on my cheek. It was tender, a reminder. The final resource was luck. And I knew mine was running out. I would need more torches, a lot more. I stood up and walked toward the supply chest. Tomorrow was another day, another inventory. The count would be different. The job would be different. But the darkness would be the same. It was always the same. The door to the ratway was a black mouth waiting to swallow the light. I turned away from it. For tonight I was safe. I had survived. It was not a victory. It was a postponement. I found a corner, sat down with my back to the wall and watched the fire. That was the extent of it. I had bought myself a few more hours of light. The price had been everything I had. It always was. The final inventory: torches, 0. Healing potions, 0. Lockpicks, 1. I stood in the filth of the lower canal, the cold water seeping into my boots. The job was a failure. The boy was a liability, but I was alive, and I had to go back and face Brynjolf. That was a different kind of darkness,